It is myth which is accepted by many without any fact check that all Ottoman sultans after Suleiman the Magnificent were totally rubbish. And today's video is about busting this myth. And we will talk about great and able sultans after Kanuni. First we will talk about Ahmed I, who was first Ottoman sultan who paid attention and interest in the state matters. After death of Kanuni the Magnificent, he was only 14 years old boy when he ascended to Ottoman throne and got sultanate, which was facing crises due to long Turkish war, and he solved them efficiently and even re-established Ottoman authority over much of lost territories of Wallachia, Transylvania and Moldavia, though not gaining everything lost due to blunders of his father and grandfather, and signed Peace of Zitvatorok, in which he decided to give importance to situation on ground rather than prestige, and also managed heavy Safavid pressure on eastern borders very carefully and maturely. But he is only known for Blue Mosque. After death of Ahmad I, his brother Mustafa I was given Ottoman throne but was soon removed as he was mentally unstable, so son of Ahmad I Osman II ascended to throne at age of only 13 years. But still he was able to run the state. He detected the weakness of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth fighting with Sweden, so he decided to open another front against them as they were interfering in Moldavia, which was given back to Ottomans. At end of long Turkish war during reign of Ahmad I, so campaign was launched and his 100,000 Ottoman army met small Polish-Lithuanian host of only 35,000 and 40,000 Cossack reinforcement, which were very irregular at border of Moldavia and Ukraine. At fortress of Khotan, situated on Dniester River, all was going according to planning of Sultan, but when siege started his indisciplined janissaries were unable to storm that small fortress of weak Polish-Lithuanian host. And soon they rebelled. Insisting to go back, Sultan Osman was forced to leave, signing treaty with Commonwealth in which Poland agreed to Ottoman demand of not to interfere in Moldavia again, and Sultan and his host left the fortress and get back to Constantinople. After this campaign, Osman II was first Ottoman Sultan who realized that janissaries are no more strong enough due to refusal of reforms and loss of discipline, so he decided to raise new modern army to replace these indisciplined mob-like janissaries, who rebelled against Sultan and even killed him, so Osman II became first Ottoman Sultan to be killed for modernizing his empire. When Osman II was executed, then for some time Mustafa was once again given throne, but soon he was removed by only 11 years old nephew son Murad IV. And Murad IV proved to be one of the most powerful sultans of empire, but later, at time of his ascension, he was just a kid, so real power was given into the hands of his mother Kozum Sultan. Under her rule, Sultanate was utterly devastated by internal rebellions and massive invasion of Safavids under Shah Abbas I capturing Baghdad. As his mother was unable to protect empire and janissaries' power grows even further. But in 1632, when he took full control of power in his own hands, turning point arrived as he crushed janissaries and Sipahi rebellions brutally and executed traitor Grand Vizier Topel Pasha. Soon Murad became a symbol of fear for janissaries, as they were even scared to talk against him with their fellows, as Murad established network of spies within their ranks. And soon Ottoman army was again converted into most disciplined army of its time. He banned janissaries to get out of barracks without permission, introduced drills, set up proper system of accountancy and documentation for nation's arsenal, and reintroduced vast use of firearms. Even Ottoman courts begun to function properly. Bribery and corruption become nearly extinct. After solving internal issues in 1635, campaign was launched against Safavids and resulted into capture of Yerevan under Murad's personal command, which was first military victory for Ottomans under Sultan Murad IV. In 1638, second campaign was launched against Safavids with goal of capturing Baghdad under Sultan Murad. A 100,000-strong army begun marching from Istanbul under extreme level of discipline. Tobacco and alcohol were strictly forbidden. Even executions were conducted if someone broke discipline. Due to discipline of such a level, such a large army was able to reach Baghdad in November, and siege of city begun, having 35,000 Safavid host present, and city was extremely fortified. Murad himself supervised the siege, which boosted the morale of army. So jewel of late Abbasid Caliphate fell into the hands of Murad within 1 month and 10 days. After fall of Baghdad, Sultan wanted to sack even Safavid capital of Isfahan. But his army was too much tired after brief march and siege, so seeing all the goals of campaign achieved, he decided to go back to Constantinople. In 1639 Treaty of Zuhab was signed in which all of modern-day Iraq was given to Ottomans, while Safavids were allowed to keep lands in Caucasus. This treaty fixed the modern borders between Iran, Iraq, and Turkey. Fights in Yemen also occurred when Qasimid Yamni forces besieged holy city of Mecca, so army was sent from garrison of Egypt. And invaders were driven back, after which campaign towards Yemen was launched, though Yamni resistance was not crushed due to difficult terrain and distance from capital, but Ottomans were able to keep control on rich coastal belts of Area and Sana'a, capital of province of Yemen. He also paid special attention towards seas. When he ascended to throne, navy was at brink of collapse, as after death of the magnificent Suleiman and his great admirals like Hiruddin Barbarossa, Piali Pasha, Sakulu Mehmet Pasha, navy was never given such attention. So navy was devastated, and imperial arsenal of Istanbul, Gallipoli and Istanbul dockyards become the harbors of corruption, while sailors were also suffering from poor discipline like janissaries. On the other hand, Murad understood that empire is in urgent need of strong navy due to strong Portuguese and Safavid alliance in Persian Gulf and Arabian Sea, on the other hand Spanish and Venice alliance in Mediterranean. So he reorganized the office of Grand Admiral, improved discipline, and ordered the construction of new type of ships for Ottomans known as galleon rather than traditional Ottoman galleys to keep up with Europeans. He also reformed naval financing by doing crackdown on embezzlement in the imperial dockyard. All this strengthened Ottoman presence in seas. Then he begun planning to crush Venu's power in Mediterranean by capture of Crete, but he died before the campaign only at age of 27. So all this lead to successful landings of Ottoman army in Crete with help of navy soon after death of Murad, and island was captured with this power of Venu's was finally neutralized forever. But Murad was not living to see this. Though all credit goes to him, although in later days of campaign military once again lost discipline due to weak leadership, but still due to excellent leadership of Murad IV empire was once again seen as strong power of globe until the blunder of Great Turkish War. After death of Murad empire was once again on path of decline, and in Great Turkish War act as a catalyst to the decline. More than 150 years have passed, but not even a single ruler like Murad arrived in the house of Osman. And result was destructive for the great empire. But then such a man arrived who could be called as gifted king to empire in times of crises, or philosopher king, and he was Selim III. In 1789, when Selim ascended to the throne, empire was facing immense level of crises on all fronts. The Ottomans were in the middle of a disastrous Russo-Turkish-Austrian War of 1787 to 1792. Russian armies under Catherine the Great were advancing deep into Ottoman territory, especially in the Black Sea region. Austria also joined Russia, putting extra pressure on the Ottomans. The Ottoman military was losing repeatedly, showing how outdated it had become as compared to Europeans. European powers had surpassed the Ottomans militarily, scientifically, and economically. The balance of power in Europe was shifting against the Ottomans. On the other hand, Ottoman navy was also too much outdated and could not even match Russia's Black Sea Fleet, which was among weakest naval power in Europe. Control over the Mediterranean was slipping, with European navies dominating the seas. The internal situation was also not friendly for Ottomans. The janissaries had become extremely corrupt, lazy, and resistant to reforms. Instead of being a professional elite force, they interfered in politics and were even doing their own businesses. And many of them were shopkeepers and run their shops rather than going to barracks. They blocked reforms that threatened their privileges. There was also an immense financial crisis. Endless wars drained the treasury. Corruption and tax farming weakened central authority. Inflation rose due to debased coinage and uncontrolled spending. Old system of governance was also not working. Many provincial governors acted independently of the central government. In places like Egypt, Syria, and the Balkans, local rulers and notables were gaining power at the expense of the Sultan. On one hand, Europe was entering the industrial age and Enlightenment, while the Ottomans were far behind in military technology. So Selim decided to act as Ottoman forces continue to suffer defeats in the ongoing Russo-Turkish-Austrian War. Selim begins drafting plans for military reform, later called Nizam-e-Jadid, New Order, and also managed to stabilize Ottoman position on Austrian front and convinced Britain and France for modern arms supply, so his army was able to inflict heavy defeats on Austrians. So in 1791 Leopold II of Austria makes peace with the Ottomans due to exhaustion and fear of revolutionary France, and even surrendered Belgrade to Turks. Austria withdraws from the war, leaving Russia as main enemy. After solving Austrian problem, Selim moved towards Russians, but Russians could not be defeated, as they were extremely powerful as compared to Austria, and Ottomans were just in need of survival and peace with Russians until modernization. Thus in 1792 Treaty of Jassy was signed with Russia, in which Dniester River was set as a border. But Russians have captured Crimea in that war. After achieving peace, Selim now has breathing space to focus on reforms. 1793 was official start of Nizam-e-Jadid reforms, in which new European-style army was created, trained by foreign officers. New treasury, era-Jadid, established to fund reforms. He also established permanent embassies in Paris, Vienna, Berlin, and London, which was a major diplomatic modernization step. In 1794, new military schools opened for artillery and engineering. European-style uniforms and drill were also introduced for new army. In 1795, he consolidated reformist advisors and officers around him. But resistance also had begun from Janissaries and conservatives, who see reforms as a threat. In 1798 Napoleon invaded Egypt, which was too much shocking for the Ottomans. French defeated them at Battle of the Pyramids. So Selim decided to ally with Britain and Russia against France. British Admiral Nelson destroyed French fleet at Battle of the Nile. In 1799 Napoleon defeated the Ottoman forces at Battle of Mount Tabor, Palestine. Napoleon's siege of Acre, Syria, fails after joint Ottoman-British resistance. French eventually forced out of Egypt. In 1801 and 2 the French army was expelled from Egypt by Anglo-Ottoman cooperation. Treaty of Paris, 1802. Ottomans make peace with France. But during whole war Nizam-e-Jadid didn't even fire single shot as other old factions of the Ottoman army refused to fight along them, as in this war they could be used as elite unit alongside with other elements of Ottoman army. Still, Selim was able to protect empire from another destruction after joint Russian-Austrian invasion. After war he continued to expand Nizamedid army. In 1804 First Serbian uprising begins under Karađorđe Petrović, which was a major Balkan revolt against Ottoman rule. And Selim distracted between Balkan unrest and internal opposition to his reforms. From 1805 to 1806 Janissary unrest keep growing against Nizam-e-Jadid reforms. So in March 1807 Janissary revolt in Istanbul began, also called as Kabaksi Mustafa Rebellion, in which Janissaries rised against him. An internal opposition to his reforms. From 1805 to 1806, Janissary unrest kept growing against Nizami-Seded reforms. So in March 1807, Janissary revolt in Istanbul began, also called as Kabaksi Mustafa Rebellion, in which Janissaries rised against him. New order reforms. Selim's loyal Nizam-e-Jedid army could protect him, but Selim didn't use them as he didn't wanted bloodshed, and Nizam-e-Jedid barracks were outside Istanbul, while Janissary barracks were in heart of Istanbul. Otherwise, 15,000 Nizam army could crush all these mob-like Janissaries. So Selim was deposed on May 29, 1807. And his cousin Mustafa IV becomes Sultan. Though his loyal Alemdar Mustafa Pasha, a reformist governor, marches to Istanbul to restore Selim. But Selim was murdered before Alemdar Pasha could rescue him. After death of philosopher king, all his reforms were reversed, leaving empire venerable, and all hopes were destroyed. After death of Selim, Mustafa was installed as a ruler, but was removed soon as and Mahmud II became a new sultan of Ottoman Empire. Like Sultan Selim III, Mahmud was also in favor of new reforms and modernization, but he knew very well that what happened to Selim. So he decided not to confront these conservatives and Janissaries directly. Instead, he quietly began building loyal forces and allies among reformist officials. For this purpose, he began with weakening of power holders who were one of the strongest support for Janissaries, and they caused too much difficulties for Selim and his late army. These were mainly provincial notables like Ayan and Darabes who had grown too strong as compared to their original strength with passage of time, so Mahmud systematically reduced their autonomy by centralizing power. He deprived the Janissaries of their main allies. With this he also continued his secret military reforms, and kept small groups of modern troops known as Sekbani-Sedid and later Askinci units hidden or disguised. He often used the excuse of needing new forces against Russia or rebels to mask this training. He had also done administrative and symbolic preparations for his action against Janissaries and ordered bureaucrats and officials to adopt Western-style dress and practices, reducing Janissary influence over civil institutions. Gradually created a modern treasury ministries and councils, which could survive without Janissary interference. He also worked a lot on public opinion and propaganda. He slowly turned religious scholars, ulama, and the public against the Janissaries by exposing their corruption, drunkenness, and lawlessness. Built support in Istanbul so that when the clash came, the people cheered the Sultan, not the Janissaries. After 18 years of hard work, he was finally prepared to trigger the final showdown. In 1826, he announced the creation of a new Askinci Corps, which was already created secretly, supposedly to serve alongside the Janissaries. But after listening about Sultan's plan of creation, if new army Janissaries predictably revolted, this gave Mahmud the legal and religious excuse to declare them traitors with support from clergy and public. Thus his loyal, highly modernized troops with modern artillery arrived at scene and conducted powerful cavalry charge and very accurate infantry assaults which surprised the undisciplined and poorly prepared Janissaries, and with this these Janissaries begun to run towards their barracks to prepare defense, but it was too late now. These modern troops surrounded Janissary barracks and started heavy bombardment with their artillery. Soon barracks caught fire. With this most of Janissaries were killed inside barracks. Some tried to escape barracks but were hunted down. With this Janissary power in capital was dismantled, and Janissaries present in other areas of empire were too weak as compared to that of Istanbul garrison, so were easily dismantled. With this gates to modern Ottoman Empire were opened by Sultan Mahmud. After this Mahmud II started expanding new army, with name of Asakiri Manshuri Mohammadi, victorious soldiers of Muhammad, a modern disciplined army trained along European line. But this army was very new and was in need of time to get mature. So the empire was left with very little and very new army, and this little army was too new and too immature and too little in strength to serve the empire, although it was modern. So seeing that Ottomans are left with no or very little army, the Russians invaded the empire in 1838 and defeated them badly. On the other hand, the Greeks revolted and got separated from an empire, while Muhammad Ali Pasha from Egypt also rebelled and created his own empire in Egypt and also invaded Ottoman Empire, even threatening Istanbul, but he was finally stopped by the foreign interference. But still Mahmud had given Ottoman Empire a great relief. After him Abdulmecid I arrived, who was truly a great sultan, remembered for his famous Tanzimat reforms and Crimean War. In Tanzimat reforms such steps were taken which were very important. Some of them are as follow: equality between Muslims and non-Muslims under Ottoman law, introduction of Western-style schools, codified laws, and started railways and telegraphs. Declaration of the Gulhane Edict, 1839, guaranteeing life, property, and honor of all subjects. Organization of taxation, military service, and administration. During Crimean War, new Ottoman army got too much experience of modern warfare and tactics by fighting alongside with their British and French allies against their traditional opponent army of Russia. British generals even praised the army of Ottomans raised by late Mahmud II. Among these generals were Lord Raglan, who noted that the Ottoman soldiers fought with great bravery and endurance, especially at the Battle of Silistra and in the defense of Sevastopol. He admired their ability to endure harsh conditions with limited supplies, often performing better than expected compared to Western European troops. Another important figure was General Sir Adolphus Slade, a British naval officer who served the Ottoman Navy, directly known in Ottoman service as Muzaffer Pasha. He also praised the courage and discipline of Ottoman in war. Ottoman army was commanded by legendary Mukhtar Pasha, also known as Motor Pasha. But Crimean War costed empire a lot economically. After him, last great ruler of empire was Sultan Abdul Hamid, also known as last true Ottoman king. He limited his powers, and first parliament was set up in the empire, but those parliamentarians were totally immature and jokers, rather than true lawmakers. When Abdul Hamid II got the throne, tensions with Russians were on peak, but peace was possible, so Sultan decided to ask for peace, but that immature parliament said that Abdul Hamid is scared and is weak ruler, and started giving example of Abdul Majid and Crimean War, although now situation was very different, so Abdul Hamid was forced into such a war in which he didn't wanted to get in. Thus Field Marshal Ghazi Osman Pasha faced 200,000 Russians. With his only 40,000 men at Plevna, he set up strong fortification for his army. He innovated with trench warfare and redoubts, inflicting massive Russian casualties, and prevented Russians for more than 5 months, which was very surprising. However, Osman Pasha's army was starving and ammunition was also getting low, and manpower was also not enough to face such a large Russian army. He wrote many letters to Sultan for reinforcements, but Sultan could not send him supplies or raise any new army for his help without approval from parliament, as other units were deployed in Caucasus to face attack from that direction. So Osman Pasha, seeing his army starving, decided to make final decision. He decided to get out of fortifications, break Russian encirclement, and escape to new location, but during night attack he was badly injured, so army go panicked, so only option left was to surrender. Osman Pasha's defense became legendary. Even the Russians honored him after capture. European newspapers, especially in Britain, France, and Austria-Hungary, began calling him the Lion of Plevna because of his heroic resistance against massive Russian-Romanian forces. The press portrayed him as a symbol of courage and military genius, even though he eventually had to surrender due to starvation and lack of supplies. This nickname spread so widely that even in Ottoman lands he became popularly known as
Plevne Karaman, hero of Plevna, and Aslan Plevne, lion of Plevna.
Purpose of telling you about this war in detail is giving you a right picture of main reason of defeat, as some people blame Abdul Hamid and Ghazi Osman Pasha. Although we are supporter of democracy, but we should accept the fault of that parliament, and Christian members of the parliament were even supporting Russians rather than their own country. Thus after war Abdul Hamid abolished the parliament and absolute rule of Sultan Abdul Hamid begun. He established a vast spy network and centralizes power. Invested in railways, telegraphs, education, and military modernization. Promotes pan-Islamism, presenting himself as caliph of all Muslims to counter European powers. From 1894 to 96 Armenian uprisings began and was crushed brutally, so Western press called Abdul Hamid the Red Sultan. In 1897, Greco-Turkish War begun. Ottoman army, reformed under German advisor, ESP. Kolmar von der Goltz, and under the able leadership of Sultan without any interfacing parliament was able to crush Greece for the first time. And even Athens was in danger. However, great powers impose peace. 1900, completion of Hejaz railway project begins, funded by Muslim donations worldwide. Once again it seemed that empire is going in right direction, but in 1908 Young Turk Revolution began, and Abdul Hamid is forced to restore the 1876 constitution and reconvene parliament. So in 1909, Abdul Hamid II deposed and sent into exile in Salonika, Thessaloniki. Later was transferred back to Istanbul. In Beylerbey Palace, where he died before total collapse of empire. After his deposition, empire was badly defeated at Balkan War due to poor leadership, as all Abdul Hamid's loyal and experienced generals were removed. And later foolish leadership joined War of Europe, also known as World War I, rather than taking benefits for weakening of Europe due to war, and finally empire was collapsed.